Amaranth fought at the Shattering of Ilium. He fell on the nightfall of the Long Dusk upon Venus, and in Mercury, during the day of Woes. He led the Starfall above the skies of Earth during the liberation, and later the defense of the Homeworld. He was the first knight into the breach during the breaking of Luna. And he was there when the Allied spheres broke the Hierophant's cord over Pluto before they killed that planet with enough atomics to crack their sun in half. And yet the scale never matched up to this. The planet was an azure world, like perfectly blown glass from the Venusian markets, a dozen tonalities of blue furnishing the sphere with stripes from the equator to the poles. Catarsis was barely bigger than Earth, with a superior population density. He had been told it was a beautiful and mysterious place, as all forbidden places are to those thirsting for discovery. Right now, that mattered less than nothing, because in between that planet and his fleet, millions died among the wrecks of murdered starships and living space behemoths. The bridge crews were desperately trying to establish IFF signals and determine just what was a Xylax vessel, what was a Confederate one, and what was part of the Felian defense fleet. Even at several thousand kilometers, the void lit up with weapon discharges, and the auger stations had to sort through the debris of numerous space stations, minefields, and gutted ships. None of the knights on board needed the augers, the sensors, or the bloody cameras to know what was going on in the vast void. Death, on a staggering scale. Cyrus's armored gauntlet closed on the railing to the middle level of the bridge, eyes forward, and jaw tense like a European storm dragon ready to pounce, the armored fingers denting the railing. Even at this distance, he could feel the thousands of tiny sparks going out every minute as the Confederation fleet was gutted and killed. The crew did not show the discomfort they were most certainly feeling at the feedback on the mantle, but they were used to such things in the void of space where thousands could be gone in a blink by a lucky round or an overloaded generator. That, and the soul core of the Lady Morningstar, was shielding them from the worst of the effects. Cyrus felt the soothing sensation of the PAI's soul core extending over his senses and anima and numbing the prickling on his soul from all the death. It was a welcomed reprieve he would not let go to waste. Psionically augmented intelligences were a godsend just because of things like this. "This makes Pluto look like a Venusian solar race," whispered Cass to his ear. Cyrus had to agree with his wife. There were thousands of vessels fighting over the void, some maintaining a sort of cohesive firing line, others engaged in brutish point-blank range gunnery duels like drunken pugilists, and a few Xylax vessels were even ramming and attempting boarding actions. The Felians were good. They had deployed their fleet at the north pole of their world, a perfect defensive position that allowed them to intercept any planetary assault or enemy fleet with ease, and kept them inside the optimal support range of their orbital defense nets. Any foe that wished to engage the void stations and the fleet at close range would have to pay a brutal price in blood and metal that not many admirals, and even fewer sailors, would be able to bear. The Xylax had bored it with an uncaring shrug. They had plowed right through it, catching the Confederate fleet in an awful position right outside of the orbital defense ring, the sheer mass of numbers and tonnage enough to bear the brunt of the punishment they had been subjected to without the need for clever tactics or subterfuge. Whoever had been in command was an utterly incompetent bastard who had tried to use their perimeter to their advantage and taunt the Xylax into the range of the defenses, only to be too slow to pull back their feint and got caught with his pants down. Whoever was in command of the Felian defenses, though, was another bastard, just a merciless one. He had ordered all defense stations to fire at will, using the Confederate fleet as a sort of living net so they could pummel the Xylax in optimal range uncontested. They had, of course, caused great damage to the Confederation fleet, which had been caught on the wrong foot and then shot in the back by allies it had been sent to protect. But the effectiveness of such an ignoble and savage tactic was obvious, as the onboard cameras showed many gutted Xylax bio-vessels of the heaviest categories. "The fucking kittens got a few of the bigger ones," mused Thana, perched over the railing to the upper side of the bridge, peering down into the screen of two auger stations, her feathered cape reeking of blood, and the collars of teeth yellow from not cleaning them. She did not care. It made her 1.6 meters of height even more terrifying, and by the face and anima of the two augur officers, it was effective. Gotten a good licking, but bastards are still ticking. They fired on the Confederate vessels. Yudiki mumbled, chitinous jaws clicking in and out as his claws gripped the railing. The coloration on his carapace had changed to an almost glacial blue that Cyrus couldn't help but interpret as getting pale. Not that he needed to see him to know, for his shock, anger, disgust, and helplessness echoed in the mantle like a brewing storm. Why? Because the Xylax did not expect them to. Cyrus answered back, eyes drinking the tactical information. Beloved Christ, there were more ships here than during the entire Third Solar War put together. The estimated casualties from cross-referencing confirmed dead ships with the Confederate records surpassed most of the first year of the Solar War alone. They went to board and harvest all biological material on those vessels. They were probably filled with troops and close by to enemy carriers or transports, easy targets to planetary-size weaponry, more so to a competent and prepared fleet. It's barbaric, the Valdori Field Marshal said, voice trembling slightly. Treacherous? The treacherous element here is whoever put such a filthily amateurish commander at the head of your fleet, my good fellow. Gavilan's tone was chevalier about the death of so many thousands, only because he would have probably executed the fool that got the fleet in such a position if he had been given the chance. They tried to taunt those abominable things into range and failed miserably. A poor attempt for a riposte, if I may say so. The Xylax are inside the first ring of Felian guns, Cassandani said, emerald eyes reading the same data as her husband. What do you want to bet they are going to attack their satellite? Augur, give me a reading of that world's moon. Class C satellite dictator, twice the radius of Phobos. Provided one of the augur officers, whose face was in a grimace, as she used her mind to direct her instruments through the maze of dead superstructures and floating bodies. I can barely get a reading, so much interference from weapon wash and engine bloom. But I can tell you the surface is covered in plasma shields and enough generators to power a fleet. That is Zenus, the only moon of Catarsis. Yudiki explained, more for the crew than the officer who had already been debriefed in transit. The Felisiasan transformed it into a sort of orbital station, levels upon levels of bunkers, supply tunnels, orbital batteries, and hangars. It has a massive shield generator array to protect it from orbital annihilation, the perfect choke point for a fleet to break against their capital world. I guess it's also their command center for the defense, Cass said, her crimson mane pulling back as she began to braid it in the ancient way of the Peloponnesians, as Martians liked to do, with her mind. Her hands were busy checking her husband's armor. Cyrus led her. Since that nasty decompression incident over Phobos, she had gotten particular about the integrity of his armor. He still let a small psionic wave of comfort and mirth edge her way and was battered to the side gently with a light chuckle that resonated in his brain. It is the most logical possibility, yes, Yudiki admitted. So the Xylax will want to harvest whoever is inside that fortress moon, Gavilan mused with a battle-hungry smile that belayed his desire for combat. These Felicians, how adept are they at close quarters? The best, Yudiki said neutrally, although no one on the bridge that had spent any amount of time around the field marshal would miss the emanations of anger at the admission. The reasons were the only thing eluding them. Until we met you, of course. Boss, we could drop over the fuckers. Thana was now hanging upside down from the upper bridge deck. Her unkempt dark hair fell downwards, giving her the aspect of some evil bat demon from ancient myth. Full-on spear tip. We have the knights for it and the infantry to choke them on that little metal moon they seem so eager to take, and my boys are thirsty for some new trophies. Too slow. Balin's powerful voice carried over the bridge. The Aeonian did not speak much, but when he did, it was important. We need to end this quick. If they adapt, we lose our chance. Balin is right, Nokoribi. Himiko's calm voice, a slight contrast to her husband's laconic one, came from the shadow of where she was sitting cross-legged on a meditation couch. We didn't come for a prolonged surface war. We are an assault force, made to break through and evacuate survivors, hit and flee. That is why we brought so many Mercurian vessels. It's their specialty. She wasn't wrong. Mercurian Medjays, their version of the solar night before the Accords of Sol, was a perfect example of this. Silent specters that only appeared after striking, only to vanish in the shadows again. The Medjay were a reflection of the entire war dogma of Mercury. We hit you without you seeing us, and we keep hitting you until we let you see us, or you can't do anything anymore. They didn't call Mercury the sphere of the all-devouring sands for its deserts. Well, not only for its deserts. You don't want to find a sandstorm with Medjays on your tail. The Hierophant's legions had found that out the hard way. But as he stared into the void and crunched the numbers, he had a pit forming on his stomach. The Xylax. They had adapted to every tactic the Confederation had thrown at them. The first reports had been skirmishes on the edge of the outer rim. Nothing too major. Nothing that had won the attention of the Corps and military command. A smart move to poke at the bear to see how it works while hidden in the shadows. By the time the massive animal that was the Confederation had found a scent, they had a pack of wolves in his den, and planets had begun to fall. 10 years of brutal attrition warfare for the outer rim fleets and army groups, only to get pushed back again and again. Because after every fight, the Xylax adapted. Better weapons, better ships, better armor and tactics. Weapons fine-tuned to the enemy, psychological warfare made to assault the sense of every race they had encountered, and the efficient harvesting and reutilizing of any biological advantage their foes had. The Xylax were an almost unstoppable force once it began to snowball out of control. It had been painfully obvious to the military command of the Confederation, and it had been painfully obvious to the Archduke of Europa the moment he brushed over the information weeks ago. Cyrus could not win an attrition war with these bastards. How long before psi weapons began to work less and less? How long until they began to create countermeasures to their railguns and pulsars? He couldn't give them enough fight to catch up. The Xylax were weak because they had fought a massive enemy that hadn't faced a serious war in more than a millennium, and an enemy that had outlawed many of the weapons Sol had standardized. In that same amount of time, humanity had known peace for the last 5 years, and even then they hadn't lost any of their bite. But for how long? Until his armadas, his orders and legions became the whetstone where the Xylax threat would sharpen their teeth till the oath they were on the throat of all living things. What to do then? It was an easy answer, truly. You break the fucking teeth and shatter the jaw. Dragons don't flee from vermin, they reduce them to ashes. And if Thana had anything to say about it, piss on the ashes. There is nothing to adapt to if you kill the enemy. All of them. I don't intend to evacuate anyone, nor anything, spoke the Dragon of Europa, rolling his neck. Cyrus, my good lord? Gavilan eyed him with the same care he might eye a wild specimen of his family sigil, the Ganymedan jungle lion. Has he gone primal on us? Gavilan turned towards his own wife. Thana shrugged, even if the glimmer in her eyes told all those who did not want to check through the unity that she was thrilled for battle. Cassandane rounded around her husband, emerald eyes meeting amber with a sharp crack of psionic power pushing against another. She scanned him, crimson armor making her features shine even more. You intend to beat the Xylax back here? It wasn't really a guess. We don't have the ships for it. But as our resident she-devil has pointed out, we have the knights, my love, Cyrus stated, his eyes turning back to the tactical displays and the element of surprise. He gestured towards the hololytic screens. We use the Felian defenses as the anvil, and we are the hammer. We strike from behind with all our might, sweep them forth, push them into the orbital defense net, and pin them there. We will still be on the receiving end of plenty of friendly fire, Gavilan mused out loud, and by judging the Felians' disposition to acceptable casualties, it is not an option I'd like to entertain. Then we coordinate with them. The Archduke of Europa rose to his feet. They used the Confederate fleet out of a pragmatic need to defend their world. We need them to believe we can save it if they help us. I'll handle that if you do not mind. Cyrus turned and nodded with gratitude to Yudiki. Might be good to remind the Felian they just broke enough intergalactic laws to fill one of your destroyers. I may have some leverage to make them comply. My thanks, Field Marshal. Cyrus bowed in appreciation. It was important to show the alliance between the authority of Sol and the Confederation was one of partners and equals. He turned to his communications officers. Ensign, fleet-wide communication. All vessels, all tercios, all legions, all tyrannies. The young man nodded, hands dancing over the display screen before giving him a thumbs up. This is Archduke Amaranth. Cyrus took a deep breath as he spoke to the 10 million souls on his fleet. He couldn't help but feel a pit of guilt for dragging them back to another Woes, after they had won the last one. It was not fair, after all the blood and the loss, all the scars that would not heal. They had to go and kill someone else's monsters, fleet into battle stations and prepare for close-range astral warfare. All ships attack pattern Dragon's Maw. First detachment Sunbreak, second detachment Moonbreak. All squadron leaders sally forth. Waning Moon and Good Hunt. Gavilan let an amused sigh escape him before descending the steps to the lower deck and began to coordinate his knights. Thana simply jumped to meet him, grav harness letting her fly down, looking like a graceful demonic pigeon. All Justicars prepare your tyrannies for boarding operations. Close quarters, full panoply. All infantry units report for counterboarding. Highlander Guard report to Base 6 for special ops. The orders had been given, but Cyrus could feel it through the unity, the sickness of pre-battle angst, the moment where men found themselves tested not on the anvil of war, but the grindstone of patience that eroded a man's psyche before the first shot was fired. They needed something. They were going against what had been portrayed as an invincible foe, outgunned and outnumbered once more. And he needed to spark that flame that had made the Sixth Order earn the monikers it had earned. Brothers and sisters, we are the fleet that broke the Hierophant's armadas over Luna, over Neptune, over Uranus. You have followed me into the very gates of hell. Neither Dante nor Milton themselves could have ever dreaded over Pluto. And you won. He let a pulse of righteous fury, of anger sharpened, flow through the unity, entering the soul core of the Lady Morningstar and then bouncing in psionic resonance. Like colorant on water, it tinged the entire fleet in that same thirst for vengeance. Like a spark on freshly spilled fuel, it lit up around the whole fleet, and now he needed to give breath to those flames. These things, these Xylax believe they are here to harvest all biological life. They won't stop until they have darkened the skies of our spheres, harvested our children, fed on our parents, and blotted our proud soul from the galaxy. Wrath, anger, hatred, fear, determination, all of it boiled over in the gestalt consciousness of the fleet, bouncing and amplifying itself on every ship's soul core, as the PAIs were overwhelmed by the birth of so many extreme emotions among their crews. There was his breath. He smiled. What is our response to that? The speakers were connected to the whole fleet so they could hear their commander speak. The response was as such coming from every vessel, every fighter, every troop compartment, so deafening that every power plate automatically deployed the helmet of every knight to counter the auditory assault. Cyrus could have warned Eudiki and the Confederate delegation. He could have lowered the volume or simply put it in video for them to see. But he wanted them to feel it, to understand it raw. Hic sunt dracones! The bridge of the Lady Morningstar trembled with the first howling from the Navy elements, including his very bridge crew, who slammed their fists over their hearts in acknowledgement of their fellows, the more calm and more level-headed among the Armada. Hic sunt dracones! Bellowed all infantry and armored elements from their barracks, bunks, engineering bays, and vehicles. He could feel the raging thunder as the war striders thumped their feet against the floor of their loading bays, of heavy armor revving their engines in unison. Hic sunt dracones! Bellowed them all again, joined by every knight on the fleet. If the sound was impressive, the feedback from the fleet's unity was cathartic. A wave of cool determination, cold fury, flaming wrath, vivid eagerness, and iron will that sweet away every doubt, fear, and hesitation in the hearts of those who heard it. Crimson Gold Armada, breakers of tyrants, demon slayers of old, named in honor of the fleet under whose might the sun did not set, who broke storms and tempests to return home to defend it, the great and cherished one. Stand to your stations and stand to your oaths. Soil invicta, Deus misericordiae. Cyrus cut the channel and looked on ahead, rising from his command throne. bringing his own psionic high from the furor of his men under control. Cooler minds prevailed in war. Prognosticars, do you have a seer window? The prognosticars, the specialist psionics of the fleet, deep inside the bowels of the ship, spoke back, deep in concentration. Seer window confirmed, Archduke. Trust to 68%. Too much traffic for anything above that. 68% was suboptimal, but a remarkable commander didn't forge his victories in good odds, but in frightfully bad ones. Then we will have to make do. Cyrus crossed his hands behind his back, savoring the command, the moment. Back again to killing that which lurked in the dark, just like on Mars, Pluto, and Earth. He hoped the abominations of this galaxy got the memo once and for all. All vessels fire at will. Cyrus dived into the ebb and flow of the mantle, and the dragon woke up.